Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the politics that we've recently seen as far as the IMF is concerned, as far as the government's back-breaking efforts in trying to restore and resume the monetary fund's 9th review, and the fact that sadly we are still seeing some politics being played by certain political parties at this time. We'll be talking about the ramifications of this kind of damaging politics on the overall economic process and revival of economy. And a little later on, we'll also be talking about the legal process as we've seen as far as the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is concerned. We've seen at this time statements potentially damaging, indicative of a whole system, potentially damaging and reeking of a bias against an individual. What that means for the politics of this country, what that indicates for the overall political process and its sanctity in this country. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Dr. Shujat Farooq, who is Chief of Research, PIDE. Thank you for joining us today. A little later on, we'll also be joined by other guests. Dr. Shujat, like I said, we've been talking for a while now about the 9th review, which has been pending. We've been talking about the fact that, the efforts the government has been making. There is clearly, unfortunately, even at this time, politics being played on the issue of IMF and its 9th review on the issue of policies. How do you overall look at that?
Yeah, this is misfortune that in Pakistan, we always not concerned with consistent of policies, and if you look the history, whenever there is opposition government, whatever the government do, they deny it. Look at certain policies like state-owned enterprises, privatization, energy policy, and even signing of IMF. Every time, unfortunately, the opposition especially, they look into politics. And the same is happening in Pakistan. For example, you can see that previous government, they signed this IMF, that deal, but when they were out, they started to criticize. Even they have to own it, because that until this 30th June, that that commitment that was made by the previous government, and this government own it and carry on it. But unfortunately, still that you can see that there were certain that telephone calls where some provincial governments, they were asking the finance minister.
But you can throw the whole country and its economy under the bus.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a consistent, it's not one-off, and there are ramifications that the government and its people, you and I, are even paying today as far as those decisions are concerned, like you said, indicative of the telephone calls, or overall policy decisions that seem to hinge only on political gain.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that even you can see that the IMF representative, they managed the meeting with that.
And it was all political parties.
Yeah, and they managed the meeting with all political parties. I think that is a good move from the lender side, because that lender wants certain surety and certain stability over the next 9 months, because that whenever IMF came into deal, it means that in next 9 months there will be certain stability, and with this that $3 billion, we will definitely receive some $20 to $25 billion from certain other friendly countries. But I still think that such move that should come from the political side, that should come from the political leadership, that we must build a consensus, and through this consensus, that our policies that should be adopted by every government, whatever the government is in. Ruling party.
Fair enough. Let me go to Rana Maqbool, Senator Rana Maqbool, who's with the PML-N. Thank you for being with us. We also have with us Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Rana Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Rana Saab, we saw recently, even after all that has transpired, there is still politics being played on the issue of economy. Do you agree?
Yes, it's very unfortunate. They shouldn't do this, because it's a very serious issue, and the nation is confronted with a grave challenge of economic crisis. For that purpose, political stability and unanimity of views on growth of economy is indispensable. So it's high time the politicians rise to the occasion and try to honestly conduct themselves in interest of nation. I think due to this level of betrayal of the solemn cause of nation, we are suffering. Time and again, this is being repeated. Yesterday even, once the delegation of IMF called on the previous government leaders, they were not able to persuade them that way because they have been trying host. Nobody was responsible for their predicaments and for the maladies they are suffering. So let's have a healthy attitude.
Right, fair enough. Let me come back to you. Niaz, when we are at this time also talking, we have been for a while talking about economic charters, we've been talking about policies, economic policies that transcend the time period of any one political government. Long-term economic policies that work towards a consistent, steady economy for Pakistan. In the kind of play that we are still seeing at this time, that we've also seen, very recently with IMF trying to take, all parties on board. Do you think that's still a possibility?
Well, a charter of economy has been talked about ever since, we had the charter of democracy. But let's be clear, about the difference between the two. A charter of democracy that we had in 2006 was just a code of conduct between the two leading parties that, they will not try to undermine each other when they are in power. And that made sense because of what had happened in the 1990s and how that led to the martial law of 1999. And it related to, a lot of constitutional amendments which were not possible without the support of the other. So having that kind of a charter of democracy made sense, especially given the fact that, we were then in a period of dictatorship. So it made sense to talk about a charter of democracy, a return of democracy. But a charter of economy is different. You don't really need a constitutional amendment in most cases for economic issues. It's about, the government implementing its policies diligently. Now, of course, a charter could still help in some issues where, the opposition always tries to undermine the government on certain issues, whether, you're talking about increasing taxes on the real estate, or whether you're talking about, taxes on the retailers. Whenever any government tries to tax those sectors, the opposition tries to play it up and tries to whip up emotions against such policies. Now, if we can have, an agreement on those kind of issues, that I think would be helpful, for example, on what to do with the...
Niaz, isn't the question primarily just that when are we going to rise above short-term political gain to long-term policies that are fruitful for a healthy economy, which would suit everyone eventually?
That's why I feel that, a charter of economy is not sufficient because of two reasons. First of all, our economic problems are so tied up with our security problems, with our political problems, that unless we have a broader charter of governance which takes care of all these issues, our foreign consistency in foreign policy, consistency in security policies, it doesn't make sense if a new government comes in and, starts negotiations with TTP only to see it start, terrorist attacks in Pakistan, which affect the economy. So if we want to have something, it has to be something, a charter of governance, where, we look at everything, foreign policy, security policy, political issues.
Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, who's a senior economist, and then I'll go to Rana Sahab again. Dr. Vaqar, can you hear me?
Yes.
Dr. Vaqar, we're talking whether we term it as a charter of governance or whether we term it as a charter of economy. For us to have long-term economic policies at this time, how essential do you think it is for a healthy economy keeping in mind the situation where it is at this time as far as Pakistan is concerned?
Yes, I think you have put the question very correctly. A longer-term consensus on the contours of essential economic reforms is need of the hour now. I think this is what IMF has also highlighted in their press release, which they have issued while they have announced the standby arrangement. And probably this is the reason why they are meeting almost all the political parties within the country to create a multi-partisan consensus around the longer-term reforms. Now, how much of this effort can be called a charter of economy? That, of course, can be debated. Furthermore, whether a charter of economy would require a legislative cover, or can it be done within the existing rules of business, again, is something which the political brass may like to discuss amongst themselves. But absolutely, I think this is the way forward. The recent initiative by the cabinet in the form of the Investment Facilitation Council is also a step in the direction where the PDM coalition at least has come around and at least come forward with some sort of a consensus on basic reforms which shouldn't be disturbed in the longer term if investment is to be attracted in the country.
Right, fair enough. Let me come back to you. Dr. Shujat, as far as generally speaking, as far as the concept of a charter of governance, charter of economy, whatever we may call it, is concerned, keeping that aside, there have to be some kind of, do you agree that political norms, whatever they may be, there has to be, there are issues that are above politics of this country, and our politicians perhaps across the board need to aspire for that kind of politics where there is certain things that need to be sacred for this country, for the governance, for whoever then comes up and takes is at the helm of affairs at any given time.
Yeah, Mahrukh, if you see the growth of that nations, that political maturity, political stability, that is highly linked with that economic growth. Look at Turkey, you can see Korea, Malaysia, where that sustained political stability and maturity that that definitely contributed in growth. Unfortunately, that in Pakistan, if you see, especially over last 3 decades, our growth, productivity, everything, unfortunately, that is declining. And our regional countries like India, Bangladesh, that they are going far, above in all these dimensions.
But if we compare for example, India also, we saw, when things changed for India, when they, had an across the board, they agreed with whatever had gone wrong, they announced it freely, and then they chose to move forward as one. Without, stone throwing, without throwing the country's economy and its decisions, owning them also.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can see that, so that's why, that we require certain political harmony and political maturity to build consensus, that we don't require alone charter of economy. I think we require certain reforms on governance, on politics, and even, that on economy. Look at India. I think in 1991, that they make the decision that there will be no more IMF. So they sit together, they build a roadmap, they build the policies, and every government followed that policies. Unfortunately, that here we are facing the blame game. If one government adopt the policy, we take some decision, unfortunately that is not followed by the next. So that's why we are facing the dilemma that our policies still, they are not sustainable, and even I think we don't have any clear roadmap.
And if we talk about, let me go to Rana Sahab. Rana Sahab, even when we talk about investor confidence, when we talk about long-term policies, they will play a huge role in restoring the kind of confidence that is needed, for example, within our business community. community within, our overall overseas Pakistanis also, because if people feel that the direction has been set, regardless of who is going to be at the helm of affairs, say, 3 years from now, 1 year from now, whenever, there is a direction that each government will own up. Things will change, it will restore your investor confidence. Isn't that true?
It's fantastic on your part, Mahrukh. You have really hit the nail in the head. That's our basic problem, that there is a level of rampant disunity and fragmentation amongst the politicians. That has to be, all these gaps are to be bridged with efforts and endeavors seriously in interest of nation. My friend has mentioned about India. You might remember once Pakistan was on rise economically, there was a drastic movement upward, vertical movement as well. The economy of the country was concerned between 91 and 93. Manmohan Singh, who was the finance minister of India, he visited Pakistan to examine what's happening, why there is such a spectacular growth in economy. So he studied and went back, imitated this model, and a miracle were performed in India, because there was one thing which is very important. That was the spirit of continuity, the syndrome of continuity. And there was no disruption right in the way of economic growth. So they had only $2.1 billion in their kitty once they started with this economic overhauling of the country. So that is there. But our problem has been a little different. No doubt, politicians' consensus were required. But what about other stakeholders? They are all also to be brought on one table, just to convince each other that the people who matter at certain junctures, they should also support this total mission of continuity. There has to be perfect predictability as far as business of is concerned, so that, as you rightly pointed out, the foreigners and our countrymen outside, they have clear picture and they trust the system. So it cannot be without the unanimity of views. And there are other issues which are to be resolved. For example, the financial award, time and again we discuss, there is some disequilibrium. That is also to be rationalized, that this distribution of funds between provinces and the federal government. And more so, ISA issue is always there in every meeting. The distribution of water, which is the lifeline of agriculture, that is also to be rationalized with consensus of opinion. What about the units which are lying dormant, like steel mills and huge projects like railway and PIA? That if at all we decide to go for privatization, there has to be consensus on that. There is hardly full-fledged consensus on this, because the certain parties don't agree on that. And
Rana Sahib, let me go to Dr. Niaz with this. Niaz Sahib, the same thing that Rana Sahib is saying, he's exactly talking about these, these measures, these long-term decisions that have had to be taken consistently from many successive governments. Do you think that will ever happen? Do you think that there will ever be a time when politicians across the board, all political parties, agree to have those kind of reforms that need to be inculcated at this time to ensure some kind of economic health?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
yes.
It's not enough to, just make a committee or, a council to attract foreign investment, unless you have reforms in the power sector, in your state enterprises, in your tax structures, in your tariff structures, in the ease of doing business. You cannot attract commercial, long-term sustainable capital. With these councils, etc., you will have, political motivated capital coming in, and that will not give us sustainable growth. So if the parties want to agree on a charter, the first point of that charter has to be is that they have to introduce merit into their cabinets. They have to follow the Congress model. Somebody was talking about India, but I think the most important thing to mention about India is the Congress model, that after Rajiv's death, the family, the Gandhi family, focuses on running the party, and they appoint competent cabinets, prime ministers, finance ministers especially, and that's what we need to do in Pakistan. Any party in Pakistan that comes in, it fills their families, their friends, their faithfuls into the cabinet without any regard to, their merit, whether they have any background in investment, commerce, all of these important ministries. For at least the top 10, 15 most important ministries, we have to have competent and the focus of the cabinet should be on merit rather than political issues. And the job of the families, the Zardaris, the Sharifs, the Imran Khans, should be to protect their cabinet from the political influences and let them, take decisions on merit. Unless that starts happening in Pakistan, unless we start following the Congress model in Pakistan, we can forget about reform, we can forget about progress, we'll keep going.
How would you answer this? Let's go to Rana Sahab. I think he's the right person to answer. Rana Sahab, how would you answer this? Do you think we'll ever move towards that kind of politics, that style of politics?
Yes, the basic answer to all these questions is the politics, as far as the economy is concerned, that has to be a politics of consensus. For example, Dr. Saab has mentioned about the Charter of Democracy. Total level of disequilibrium and irritants which were there in the political relationship of the party, they were fighting, they always locked horn with each other. Once they reached a consensus, then they were able to amend a lot many historical changes into the constitution. That could not be done without consensus and without amending the constitution with 2/3 majority. So that is there. Identically, this is also very important. And I personally think that all the parties and all the stakeholders, as I mentioned, must get together within a week or 10 days and reach a consensus, chalk it out, write it down, sign it, take the confidence of the nation, and take into confidence the foreign investors.
In your opinion, will the PML-N agree to that style of politics?
Yes, PML, you might remember, right when the assembly was there, right on the first day, the leader of opposition, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, in loud and clear terms told everybody when the Prime Minister of the day was sitting, that let us reach consensus on Charter of Economy. We are there to cooperate with you. There was another leader, chairman of People's Party. He said, Imran Khan, hum tumhare saath hain. Tum kadam badhao, hum tumhare saath hain. But the leader of the house in those days, he was so, I don't know, I'm very sorry to say, self-conceited. And he had some distorted notions about himself. And he didn't agree to anything. So this is here we are.
Do you think the sentiments are still the same there? Do you think the sentiments are still the same there?
Excuse me, Mahrukh, I'm not following.
I'm saying, do you feel that the sentiments are quite the same still on the other side?
No, I don't think so. There must be change because they have created such a situation where they have lost that flavor of unyielding behavior. And I think he will be amenable to listening to these things. And that has to, all the parties have to decide, along with the stakeholders I'm mentioning time and again, because you might have observed that there is a program has been launched about improvement in technology and minerals and other sectors of economy, and they are going to work together. And the army is also involved to support all these projects. And perhaps they think that army is the symbol of continuity. The politicians come and go, they stay back. Maybe it's wrong or right, that will be seen later on. But the spirit is that we have to infuse and ensure the continuity in the system. So it's not.
I'm going to take a short break and then we'll come back and talk more about the politics as it stands and the way that we are seeing developments as far as cases are concerned, as far as exoneration in cases are concerned, which are indicative of the faults within a judiciary, a system really steeped in bias. All of that today after a short break. Thank you so much for joining us. Please stay with us. Dr. Shujat Farooq, thank you for being with us. And we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. We have with us Senator Rana Maqbool Ahmad, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, Barrister Safiullah Ghauri. Rana Sahab, we were earlier talking about the legal process at this time. You saw earlier on the statements that have come out recently about certain decisions exonerating the former Prime Minister, Mia Nawaz Sharif Sahab. It's indicative of a system at this time which, one frankly loses confidence over. How do you overall look at what's happening as far as things that are now coming to light, and also decisions that clearly were wrongly taken at the behest of one force or the other?
Yes, that malaise is there, and that's to be addressed with the level of certain dedication and certain adherence to truth. Unfortunately, you might have observed the level of adjudications, especially starting from 63A, what happened and how the Constitution was interpreted and how it was rewritten. And once the elections issue came in the Supreme Court, where whole of the nation was involved, and everybody cried hoarse and requested and prayed to the Honorable Supreme Court to constitute full court bench. But they didn't do that. You might have listened to analysis of Rima Omar, the advocate, that 18 cases, which are most highlighted cases in history of Pakistan, they were all heard by 3 judges. So if there are certain reservations at the top level, so these are to be disastrous for the system and for the credibility of the judiciary. Despite being requested by the senior most judges, the Supreme Court couldn't be able to form a full court bench. Everybody was asking for that. So that is there. They give roll out favors unnecessarily and unjustifiably. I think they should go for...
But Rana Sahab, it's not just one... let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Barrister Safiullah Ghauri. Safiullah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Safiullah, this is not about one, we can't really, pigeonhole one justice of the Supreme Court or 2 justices or 3 or, one Supreme Court even. Overall, what's happened as far as these statements that have come out are indicative of a problem as far as the justice system at this time is concerned. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with you, Mahrukh. One thing that we have learned time and again in Pakistan is that Pakistan is a country that is particularly susceptible to state capture. We have seen it in the past. We have seen when the government and all its institutions were captured by certain political parties, and now we're seeing it again. This time even by perhaps political parties and forces that are not in power. Something that I would actually echo foreign defense analyst in saying is that it's particularly easy to bring up influence within Pakistan by just having close to 5,000 paid Twitter users. And what you can do then is exert immense amounts of influence and pressure on Pakistan's topmost institutions, which go all the way up to the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And that's where the travesty of justice is. I do agree with what was just said, that the Supreme Court has been held hostage by certain individuals. This behavior by those individuals has been pointed out by senior judges of the Supreme Court. They have consistently been writing, constantly been mentioning how the constitution of benches has been illegal, how the formation and the hearing of cases that is taking place is illegal and is not compliant with the modes of justice and even by the present law, now that Parliament has passed new laws. So I do concur with the idea that Pakistan unfortunately still remains in dire need of better security apparatus so that people.
I want to come and talk about, where do we go from here? If this is going to continue, or if this is going to stop as far as the whole process of, the way that it's rigged with the bias and the way that it's manipulated, for the lack of a better word. Let me come back to you on that. I'm going to go to Dr. Niaz. Niaz Sahab, there is, we had a political party in the past that came into power with the mantra of reform. And I say this time and again because reform is a huge issue for Pakistan. To be able to take it up and say that, they're going to come and do legal reform, or they're going to come and do judicial reform. And then we saw the state of affairs the way that they are at this time. All parties agree that there is need of judicial reform. Do you think that it'll ever happen?
Well, with judicial reform, the problem is that, the legislature has been made sort of rubber stamp on so many issues. Any new law that the legislature comes up with, even good laws, like one or two that have come up recently, the legislature passes them, and, when they go to the courts, they just shoot it down. And again, with the help of, 3 or 4 very like-minded judges, it's the same bench over and over again without, the involvement of, the other 10, 15 judges. So there is a roadblock. So now, hopefully, there might be an opening now with the change of guard at the Supreme Court. People have a lot of hope with the incoming Chief Justice, who's already been informed. He has shown much more, interest in adhering to principles, to, having, the rule of law within the Supreme Court. So I hope that, after September, when there is a new, leadership at the Supreme Court, there will be this opportunity once, the new government comes in by October or November, and by December, January, hopefully, we will start moving towards, tackling these huge issues we have.
Like Safiullah was saying, Niaz Sahab, the question that, like Safiullah was saying, is it's not about just, Rana Sahab, would you agree with this? This is not just about one political party. This is going to be an across the board effort with all stakeholders playing their part as far as reform is concerned. Because, there are other issues also. This is a system where, there is, appellants are waiting for their appeals to be heard for years. In some cases, they pass away, their decisions are not made for 100, even for 80 years, 70 years. We have seen cases which are piling up. There is, the issues are right there for everyone to see and have been for a while. The point is, for anybody to take this up, it's going to be a huge mammoth task, right?
And that's absolutely correct, because this is a very sacred responsibility of every political party and every stakeholder, every individual. Dispensation of justice to the people who are in problem and predicament, there couldn't be a loftier task than this. But we have to dispense with this task very honestly and competently. Dr. Niaz has rightly pointed out, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, which we'll be seeing shortly, because the new chief, he is a different person. He has proved over years together. Now I think the justice machinery will be well greased and will start working and delivering in the right direction. Because
we saw what happened as far as Nawaz Sharif Sahab is concerned, the way that decisions were manipulated, even his family, the way that they were given out, his lifetime ban that we saw, these are issues that reek of manipulation within the system. But the point is that today this is happening to Nawaz Sharif Sahab. The point is, for all politicians, this is a lesson in point that things, could happen the same way for anybody else. But for politicians to come together, it still seems difficult, even though it's right there in front of everyone. We've seen what happened. We are seeing what's happening as far as the Superior Court at this time is also concerned. Overall, the question of fairness, the question of the law being above all considerations for any society has to be there for it to trickle down, and if the courts are functioning like it was said, then everything is okay. But are they really functioning? It's a question, right?
They are not functioning. Actually, as Dr. Niaz has rightly pointed out, that everything should be based on merit. Our basic problem is that the induction of the honorable judges at the preliminary level, at the High Court level, is not transparent. It's not fair. It's not merit. There are cartels of the judges and the lawyers who support each other and get those judges, the people appointed, perhaps who can't deliver. That is one of the major problems. Therefore, our committee, of which I am the chairman, for appointment of judges to Supreme Court and High Court, we have moved an amendment, a constitutional amendment, and we have given a new procedure to rationalize the inductions of judges, and we have tried to give a formula and outline so that the judges who are inducted are inducted in a transparent manner and on merit, so that they could be useful for the system of justice in future. But I may assure you, individuals always matter. Qadi Isa will be different. Bhagwan Das was different. Nasser Mulk was different. And Hamood Rahman was different. Cornelius was different. Identically, Saqib Nisar is different. You know what he has done. What Hamid Khan was telling on television yesterday, that it was a planned decision with malafide.
Without resorting to individual names, I do want to, as far as your party at this time is concerned, you also said earlier on, I remember that the former Prime Minister is all set to return very soon. But as far as internal politics of PML-N at this time is concerned, is that, is that likely? Is he going to come back very soon? Is this also because there is often talk of internal politics within the PML-N, with the elections very close by? What do you expect now in the next couple of weeks?
I assure you, because I'm the insider and know, there is no politics as far as PML-N is concerned for their leader. They're all one in his support, and they're all loyal to him. He will come, as far as he tells us, that as soon as the assemblies are dissolved and campaign starts, he will come and lead the campaign. So there is no iota of doubt in his arrival back to the country. He is coming shortly, inshallah, and that will be a change on the political scene, because he has great credibility vis-a-vis the masses and his supporters especially. And I tell you, his supporters and his voters, they do have association and loyalty to him, but they have a very deep sense of romance with the leader for his own gentle, kind, and affectionate conduct. He is a different person. Though he's a leader, but he's a saintly character as well. He's so likable by the people for his virtues of humility, sympathy.
I think there is by and large, agreement that Mian Nawaz Sharif Sahab enjoys popularity like no other leader as far as the PML-N is concerned. But let me go to Barrister Safiullah Ghauri ji. Safiullah, as far as the legal system is concerned, again, do you think that it's likely that all the political parties will come together? Rana Sahab is saying that he's heading that committee. And if in the absence of all stakeholders coming together, it seems like a very difficult task to begin with, because, when you start reforming the legal system, there are, it's like a whirlpool of huge lacunas and problems that have to be battled. Do you think it's really as difficult as it looks at this time, or it just needs the kind of resolve across the board and we can all do it?
No, Mahrukh, unfortunately, I actually concur with you here that it's actually much harder than it even looks. And this is because of the way our system is structured. There's many stakeholders when we talk about legal reforms. It's not about the resolve. If there was a matter of resolve, the present government probably wants certain structural and legal changes. They're unable to bring them about. They're unable to bring them because, firstly, whenever they try, they are struck down by the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court does something, it also has further support from certain bar associations. So, for instance, some recent decisions by the Supreme Court, which have been criticized by and large by many big bodies of lawyers, were being supported by the Supreme Court Bar Association, were being supported by the Lahore Bar Association. So individual bodies of lawyers are also divided. Then after that, there is also that massive issue of all the political parties that need to be taken on board. And even if all of these things are in board, it's just the process itself. The very fact that when we're talking about such structural changes, these are changes that are not going to be done by the rules of business. These are changes that are to be done by new legislations, and these new legislations need to start in the cabinet. They need to then pass through different layers of bureaucracy, need to go through the Attorney General's office, come back, go through ministries, then clear both the houses. And the process in Pakistan...
across the board, all stakeholders coming together, and in the absence of that, it's clearly not possible. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. Rana, Maqbool, Ahmad Saab, thank you for being with us. Dr. Niaz Murtaza, thank you for joining us. Barrister Safiullah, Ghauri, thank you for your very valuable input. Clearly, unless we have the kind of resolve that is needed from all stakeholders, judicial reform certainly seems far on the agenda. Let's hope that we can all move together. Certainly the government at this time seems resolved towards ironing out certain issues. Of course, this is going to be election year. Of course, we're looking at a lot of changes. Let's hope that we can head in the right direction. Of course, we also want to talk about Abdul Sattar Eidi today and his tremendous contribution to humanity, I would say, not just to Pakistan, but also his kindness, the effort that he has made all over, the work that he has done, which still leaves all of us awestruck. His contribution remains unparalleled, I wouldn't say just in Pakistan, but internationally. We can't honor him enough, we can't remember him enough. We certainly hope that there will be people who perhaps, if they cannot emulate a man like Abdul Sattar Eidi, but can aspire to be like him. Because certainly what he has done for humanity and for Pakistan, certainly no one can question that kind of contribution. A prayer for him today, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.